Looking for a small town charm that also happens to pour a really, really good glass of Pinot? Dundee, Oregon sits in the heart of the Willamette Valley and is the kind of place where time slows down in all the right ways. Think walkable streets, welcoming tasting rooms, and zero pressure to rush anywhere. Travel Dundee is offering spring discounts for CityCast listeners. Head to traveldundee.com/CityCast to unlock exclusive lodging deals and unwind your way through wine country this season. This is CityCast Seattle. I'm Jane C. Hu, and here's what Seattle's talking about. Some of Seattle's neighborhoods are being designated neighborhood centers, which will allow for taller and denser housing. We'll get into that new plan, as well as a proposal for King County sales tax that might end up shortchanging Seattle's funding for road repairs, and the state of Puget Sound parking. But first, starting next weekend, there's going to be a new art festival in town. Think Seattle's Art Basel. Here to discuss is Elishaba Wakoma, co-founder and curator of the Community Art Center Wanawari. Welcome to the show, Elishaba.
Thanks for having me.
So, okay, first of all, where does the name Wanawari come from, and what led you to found it?
Wanawari really started out as a social practice art experiment between me, my husband, Inye Wakoma, and our two friends, Rachel Kessler and Jill Freeberg. Inye's family home was at risk of being sold due to not being able to bring in funds for property taxes and upgrades and things like that. So we decided to rent the house and turn it into an art center. So we always say we're one part art and culture, and then one part anti-displacement strategy. Artists are really at the forefront of thinking about these issues around displacement and gentrification.
And you all are in the Central District, right?
Oh, yeah. Which is, the best district. But yeah, Wanawari means our home in the Southern Kalabari language of Nigeria, and Inye's father is from Nigeria. Home means a lot of things, but it also means comfort and safety.
And okay, so Wanawari is putting on this new event next weekend with the Northwest African American Museum called Black Graduation. Tell us about your vision for it and how that came about.
We're constantly thinking about ways that we can serve the community, and in particular, artists. I think, we've had so many people move because they can't afford to stay here. And the real, thing that is going to get people to stay here is people buying art, right? So building up a collector class in Seattle, every 10 years there's an article either in The Stranger or the Seattle Times of how do you get tech folks to buy art? This is one strategy that we have, is basically making a really fun art party. So we have over 30 artists from around the world that are represented, and a range of price points. So you can be, if you're already a collector, you'll see some incredible artists. And if you're new, there's going to be affordable work for you to be able to take home and love.
So how do you build a collector class? I guess also in full disclosure, I am not incredibly wealthy. So I feel like most of the art that I buy are, prints or sometimes originals up to maybe $100. Do I count as a collector?
You do. You absolutely do. So there's this incredible film, Urban Dorothy, which I tell people to watch. And they were a librarian and a postal worker. And they had one of the biggest art collections of the 20th century. You do not have to have a lot of money to be an art collector. And so a lot of my work is actually breaking down those false barriers that people feel I have to be rich to do this. No, you can buy work at a coffee shop or do a payment arrangement. And that's really supporting artist work. And in Urban Dorothy, it's so cool. There's this quote from one of the artists, I can't remember which artist, but they basically were saying, if Urban Dorothy was coming to your house, they knew they were going to be able to eat lunch and dinner for the week, right? And so, even though they were doing these small payments, they were really supporting the livelihood of artists. And that's what we're trying to do.
I imagine also just for morale purposes, as an artist, having your work appreciated and validated by someone else to be someone basically digs what I'm putting down,
Yeah. I mean, this is our inner world that we're expressing on the outside, right? And so I feel that I'm oh my God, is this stupid? Are people going to like it? But then when people want to buy it, it feels they don't even just like it. They feel like it needs to come home with them. And it's so very, very special for to be validated that way as an artist.
That's one of my favorite things about going to, say, a craft fair. I don't know that I've been to, an art festival. There's similar experiences in that it's artists who are, selling and showing their work in some way, but actually like getting to talk with the artist and be like, how did you make this? And seeing them light up when you are excited about their work as well, I think is huge. So I feel like for Black graduation, what other kind of events are part of the art exhibition aspect of things that you're really trying to bring people in for?
It's going to be a really packed, incredible weekend. So at the beginning at 6 p.m., we have Shayla Mitchell from the Shayla Mitchell Gallery coming from Washington, D.C.
Oh, cool.
She was one of the Forbes 30 under 30 folks for her gallery and represents artists. So she's going to be talking about how becoming a collector can actually build generational wealth for artists. And then we'll have Ancient Robots and DJ Issue kicking it off so people can buy art or they can dance. And then on Sunday morning, we have a brunch, a jazz brunch, where we are playing the movie Boomerang, and we have a live band playing with it. So that will be really, really fun. So this is going to be a full packed weekend of goodies.
I also like that you're looking at this from the perspective of fun, because I do feel like often our approach to business, making things happen in the community is not always fun oriented, but I do feel like we need that joy and fun to bring people in.
I mean, we literally say all the time that Wanawari is a container for joy. And we, even from the time we opened, people were like throwing parties and like celebrations. I think in times like these, no matter where you are on the political line, this is a really hard time to just be alive, and being able to be together and laugh and dance is really important.
So I know Wanawari recently celebrated their 7th birthday. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
And I know also a couple months ago, you all got a $30,000 grant to restore your home base in the Central District. Yeah. What is next for you all?
Oh, we have big plans. We're going to be doing some ADA upgrades that we're super excited about. We opened and then you're like, oh, houses aren't accessible, right? And I really want to be able to bring everybody who we care about in community to be able to access our space. So we're super excited about that. We also purchased another property that we're working on building to be an oral history studio and research center. So I'm super excited about that. And then we're also just really thinking about how we can invest more in artists for bigger commissions.
So wait, where's the new place?
Oh, I can't tell you yet.
Okay. So, well, we'll keep our eyes peeled for that.
Go to sign up to be on our newsletter and you will learn more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you mentioned, support for artists. And in a city where things are just constantly getting more expensive, and talking to arts folks around town, it feels like a lot of organizations are really feeling the pinch. But what has helped you all stay open? And in this situation, it sounds like you all are thriving and expanding.
Yeah, we're still building the plane while we're flying it and
Always.
Learning so much. We're 4 artists. So it's not like we knew how to like run a nonprofit when we started this. But I think like from the moment that we started, people really believed in this vision. And I think there is concrete ways that we've shown. We have a Black Homeowners Policy Council that's independent of Wanawari, thinking about policy issues that impact Black homeowners so they can keep and save their homes or think of creative ways to bring in income to save their homes. So I think some of that ingenuity is why we are thriving and here right now.
You're just kind of following what you think needs to be done and trying to fill what void is there.
Yeah. It's a big void, right? Like it's a nationwide problem of making sure everybody has a place to belong.
Absolutely. So how can folks find out more about Black graduation and attend?
Oh my gosh, it's free to attend, so don't think of a barrier. www.wanawari.org. You can click and get all the information. You will see the schedule. We'd love for you to sign up for register for tickets, but you don't have to. And I hope to see you next Saturday.
Great. Okay, and just to spell it in case people are not familiar, it's WANAWARI.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Just so that they definitely get to the website. All right. Elishaba Wakoma, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And when we come back, we'll talk about the next steps for Seattle's comprehensive plan. recently, City Council has considered updates to our city's comprehensive plan, a plan the Wilson administration is calling Taller, Denser, Faster, which feels very Daft Punk to me. But anyway, here to discuss, Ryan Packer, contributing editor at The Urbanist. Welcome, Ryan.
Happy to be here.
Also creative producer Liam Billingham. Hi, Liam.
Hello.
Okay, so City Council has laid out potential next steps for this plan. Let's start at the very beginning. For people who haven't been following this, what does this new comprehensive plan do so far, Ryan?
So on a high level, it allows density in more places across the city. Bruce Harrell, former mayor, had a growth plan that took some baby steps toward allowing apartment buildings in more areas of the city, creating these new neighborhood centers, which are clustered around existing business districts that people love, like Montlake and Tangletown, and allowing people to live there in denser, taller buildings. But it was very tightly focused, very limited footprint. It was a baby step in terms of allowing density. Katie Wilson repeatedly during 2025 was like, we want to go bolder, we want to go bigger. And so while the city council is currently considering that phase 2 of the Harrell plan that adds those neighborhood centers, it also includes some modest upzoning directly along transit routes. The Taller, Denser, Faster plan is intended to be the next step beyond that and intended to go a lot bolder.
So what is going to happen potentially in the next iteration of this plan?
One big thing they're looking at is going further from the transit routes. So if you live, a 10-minute walk from a frequent bus, you can have apartment buildings in that area. There's also potential neighborhood centers that were discarded. Places like Alki, the Seward Park neighborhood where the Third Place Books is at was put aside as an idea for a neighborhood center, even though it's a pretty complete walkable area. So they're going to look at that again. Even more neighborhood centers beyond that, bigger ones than the ones that we've already adopted, and also looking at additional density even in our already denser neighborhoods like Capitol Hill.
Yeah. So, okay. I feel like the neighborhood center concept is both kind of intuitive in that when you hear what the neighborhood centers are, you're like, oh, that makes sense that that's designated a neighborhood center. Like Fremont, for instance, you're like, oh, of course, that's a neighborhood center. But I feel like the designation is not always clear to people, especially with some of these newer neighborhood centers that have been proposed.
Yeah.
I'm looking at a map of them right now. But Ryan, are there any neighborhood centers that have been proposed that have particularly seen pushback from people?
Madrona is a big one. You've got those really cute storefronts along 34th, and there was a lot of pushback on the idea of allowing apartment buildings in that neighborhood, even though there's already some that, predate the current zoning that people love. And so that was the one that saw a lot of pushback. There's also the one I mentioned in Tangletown's also seen some pushback from people in Wallingford and Green Lake who are concerned about the idea of allowing apartment buildings in this beloved business district.
What's the concern about more apartment buildings? Is it just the people moving in and I guess I'm sort of curious, like when they conceive of these spaces, who are they anticipating them being for?
Yeah.
Who's going to move into these new areas?
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's a lot of concerns around, the standard traffic. There's going to be more people in my neighborhood. People talk about how there are going to be more renters in my neighborhood and they don't really appreciate the neighborhood as much as the homeowners do, which is a pretty common trope. I will say there's also a lot of concern that a neighborhood center would mean that the existing businesses that you love might have to be displaced for an apartment building, which is, it's a 1-story or 2-story building that's there now. It has a great business. Ironically, I kind of think that the focus on making the neighborhood centers more narrow and more, focused in geographic scope, which is kind of a way to respond to the criticism about them, okay, we'll make them small so that you're less bothered by them. Ironically, I think that actually kind of focuses the development and kind of ensures that smaller businesses are more likely to be displaced as opposed to having a larger neighborhood center where you could have the existing business and then a couple blocks down, a couple doors down, there would be another building that would have new businesses in addition to people living above them.
Yeah. I mean, I've also heard some conversation, especially I live close to Maple Leaf, and so I feel like I've heard a lot of discussion around there about just essentially changing the neighborhood character.
Sure.
Like, I feel like that is a go-to conversation, especially with the potential upzoning of areas that are close to a major transit line. I think initially when that was introduced, a lot of people conceptualized that as like light rail or something. But it turns out that also includes bus routes, and there are definitely parts of Maple Leaf that are currently pretty sleepy, like very neighborhoody, like not even really a lot of businesses along bus lines. And I think folks are concerned even about the first iteration of this plan having, I think it's within a block. Is that right?
A block.
And I think they're trying to increase that to half a mile or something like that. I've definitely heard people saying that they don't feel good about that for whatever reason. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's like I said, like if you're upzoning only a block directly along the street that everyone uses, you're more likely to see intense change in that direct area. And everyone's going to react to, oh, wow, this has changed a lot. And then you just walk one block over and nothing's changed. As opposed to just more dispersing the growth, you're going to see more gradual impact. But obviously that also impacts, areas that have long been considered sacrosanct. So
yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, between that half mile and a block, like, is there some middle ground that makes sense between those two things? Because it is a really interesting question about how a neighborhood would change in between those two.
100%.
amounts.
Yeah, a half mile, it's a 10-minute walk, so it's not, it's not insane, but I think right now we're having a conversation around what the limit of what we should study is. And so half mile is pretty reasonable to me, maybe even a little more if we're going to actually look at what makes sense, because once we set those bookends, it takes years to go back.
Right.
Well, Ryan, you also reported recently on another proposal in King County Council about how taxes collected for road repair would be allocated. And okay, I know this is super duper wonky. And if you're listening, you're probably like, why does this matter? But I think it does. So essentially, this new plan could kind of shortchange Seattle on how much money we get to repair our roads. So Ryan, tell us a little bit about what this proposal says right now.
Yeah. So the first thing to know is that, the King County unincorporated areas have about 1,500 miles of roads, a lot of roads, and they've traditionally only been able to be funded with the property taxes in unincorporated areas, which are pretty limited. There's not a lot of growth in those areas intentionally by the way that we plan our growth in Washington State. And so they are in a really big funding crisis in terms of the amount of money that's able to maintain the unincorporated roads. And so the King County Council is looking at a 0.1% sales tax that would be across the entire county. And so that would be generating around $100 million a year to go to the unincorporated areas.
It's a good amount of money.
It's a pretty good amount of money. It's only about half of what they estimate they're actually going to need. So,
okay.
There's a lot of deferred maintenance. If King County was going to actually add all of the ADA infrastructure that's required, curb ramps and stuff like that, at our current pace, it would take like 3,000 years to do that.
Oh, no.
And so there's a need.
Yes.
It'll time out with Ballard light rail, though, so it'll work out perfectly.
Exactly.
In 2026, I'm like, what is 3,000 years?
Don't do this.
We can't be doing all that. So Ryan,
Yeah.
I know that there's been a plan to essentially cap how much of that money can go to Seattle.
Yeah. So originally all the money was going to go to the unincorporated roads. Cities in King County were like, hey, we actually are where all the sales tax money is generated. So it's kind of not fair to just take all this money and just take it out of the cities. And so have been advocating for a pass-through to get a little chunk of this money. It's been kind of varying in terms of what that would look like. Were they going to get a full quarter of it? Ultimately, it seems like they're settling on half of a quarter, so 12.5%. And so, again, 87.5% would still go to unincorporated roads, but then that little chunk was set to be distributed equally among the 39 cities. And so Seattle down to Beaux Arts Village, which has 300 people in it. And so,
They do have very nice roads. I ride my bike there not infrequently. So,
yeah.
Well, yeah, 300 people live there. Of course, they have nice roads.
they're very windy and nice. Anyway.
But there's an amendment from Stephanie Fain, who represents South King County, that would cap any city at 15% of the total. That cap would only impact Seattle because we're the only city with more than 15% of the population. We have around 38% of the incorporated population. So it's only the people who live in cities. And so it would essentially distribute Seattle's share to the rest of the cities.
So how much impact do you think this is going to have on Seattle? Because I know one of the other council members at this meeting pointed out the fact that Seattle does have other opportunities to raise money for road repair in a way that some of these smaller cities might not.
I mean, it's true because the voters and the elected leaders in Seattle chose to do that. And so the impact on Seattle it's going to be, if it's adopted at this 15%, it's a couple $1 million a year. And so that's not nothing. It's not a massive windfall for Seattle, but it would be a reflection of a policy choice that Seattle and essentially would be keeping because we're being proportional. And, it would be keeping Seattle's sales tax dollars in other jurisdictions where it wasn't generated.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear about stuff like this, I think I get a little bit like, brah, about living in a city, because it feels like so much of the reason people come here to visit is to see the city, is to, go to Pike Place, is to launch for their cruise, right? And then I'm driving around downtown and my tires are like, ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. And I'm like, why shouldn't we get more? It feels logical to me as a citizen of Seattle.
Yeah. And, the reason to invest in the unincorporated roads is because all county residents use those to get places between cities out in the Snoqualmie Valley if you go out for festivals out there. But also, you're right, people come into Seattle from the outlying areas as well. And so using sales tax money to figure out how to fund roads is inherently kind of a fool's errand if you're trying to be completely fair.
I mean, I will say that a lot of the unincorporated parts of King County, I can think of a few spots where, as a cyclist, I would love for them to repave. But I'm also generally thinking about how it is better maintained, at least from my tiny little bubble of where I like to ride my bike compared to middle of town. Even really in my neighborhood, I feel like there's a lot of broken up stuff that because we just have such a high density of folks coming through all the time compared to maybe some of the more outlying areas. But
that's true. But also think about areas that you may not always acknowledge as unincorporated. So, if you take the H line through White Center, you're on unincorporated roads, and that is also pretty potholed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is.
That's interesting.
Well, one thing is for sure, which is I'm sure we would all love to have more money for road repair. But this is still in pretty early stages, right, Ryan? So this has not been passed yet.
I mean, it's in hot negotiations right now. There had been a vote scheduled for next week that's now, I've heard, pushed to June. So there's more negotiations happening behind the scenes. But it's interesting because it's not going to the voters, and it's not being enacted by the King County Council. It's being enacted by them as a special purpose district, if we're getting even wonkier. And so as soon as they take a vote, it's in effect. There's no opportunity for the executive or Maya Zahalai to veto it. It's happening.
All right. Well, we will be keeping an eye on this, and we'll see where that 0.1% sales tax goes. Let's take a break, and when we come back, let's talk about another fun but wonky topic here: parking. Bellevue might soon start charging for curbside parking in their city. Ryan, you reported on this recently for The Urbanist, and you wrote that Bellevue, quote, took a step away from its suburban-oriented past with a quiet, little-acknowledged vote Tuesday to implement a paid parking program. Okay, first of all, I'm curious, why do you think this hasn't gotten very much attention?
Primarily, it's been moving forward kind of slow, and so it's been getting a couple of media notices, but I think that's kind of been the intention behind it, was kind of advance it forward slowly so that it doesn't attract too much attention. But
I do think this is also interesting in that Bellevue, I think has changed a lot in the last 10 years. Like the skyline has really been built up. It feels like now with the 2 line connecting Bellevue and Seattle, it really is feeling more like a city and less like a suburb of Seattle.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of a city in its own right. And it always has been. It feels like a real city thing to be like, you got to pay to park on the street.
As a recent arrival, I view Bellevue as another city. Like when you describe it as like, oh, it's kind of this, sleepier town or whatever, it doesn't feel that way to me at all as like a newcomer.
I also didn't realize you could park for free on the street there all the time. Like, I guess I kind of assumed that in some neighborhoods you could, but I guess I just assumed that it would be that you would have to pay for parking in downtown, but apparently not until this goes into effect.
Yeah, it's wild to be parking next to a 50-story skyscraper in downtown Bellevue and not have to be charged anything. So yeah, we've been reporting a lot on Bellevue's growing pains and the fact that city leaders are really trying to emphasize the fact that they are a city in a very diverse, dynamic one, even though obviously there's still a lot of suburban-oriented policies and programs over there.
What has the reaction been like to this paid parking? So it's only in certain neighborhoods, right? It's like downtown and a couple other neighborhoods.
It's in the dense areas that they're trying to grow. And, there's been a lot of pushback, I would say, on social media around the idea because it sounds like something is being taken away. I think Bellevue's leaders kind of acknowledge that this is something that's way overdue. The thing about paying for parking is that it actually helps businesses because you ensure that there's more turnover. If you want to stay all day in Bellevue, you can find an off-street parking stall somewhere and pay that money as opposed to just parking the entire day on the street. You're leaving. Curb pricing is a way to actually make sure that you are actually utilizing the space that you have.
That's so interesting because a couple months ago, I had like a parking dispute and basically we got charged even though we paid. And I called the restaurant and was like, can I have a copy of the receipt? I don't have it. Like, I would like to be able to prove this. My wife was like, I'm going to court. I'm not paying this. She's a lawyer. I called them and I was like, it was relatively new that they were charging for parking at this time. And the restaurant was like, yeah, we hate it. There's no foot traffic anymore because people are not willing to pay to park here. Like, it's been bad for us as a small business. So it's interesting to hear the inverse of that.
Yeah, I feel like when there are conversations about parking, which there are many of them, in a lot of like denser areas, some would say that obviously the intent is to try and get people to get there in some other way, right? Like you can take transit, you can walk or bike if you're close enough. But it does make me wonder whether, I don't know that this would be the case in Bellevue, but I'm thinking about denser areas in Seattle. Like if realistically, we're just pushing more people into paying for private parking, especially these kind of like predatory lots. Thinking about that happens a lot up in like Greenwood. People are using like private companies where people are like selling their parking spots through like Spot Hero and stuff like that.
Well, it's a scarce commodity. So, it's ultimately, the price that people are willing to pay. And so obviously we have, park and rides. You can kind of park further away and walk or catch a bus. But ultimately, the demand is for a, dynamic, dense area. It's generally so overwhelmed in terms of actual demand versus the available space that being able to price the curb and actually kind of, it's kind of wild that, you pay, how much to get on a Sound Transit train to ride over there, but then you could just drive over there and then just park on the street. It's also a little bit unequal. So it's kind of bringing that into alignment.
Speaking of the intersection of Sound Transit and parking, I feel like I've seen more discussion lately with the new light rail stations. Many of them do have parking nearby. But the parking is often full, which I think is great because it means that people are kind of taking advantage of the fact that it is more convenient to drive to transit and then take transit into the denser parts of town. And I'm curious what you all think about the possibility of having that parking be paid, because in the Bay Area, the BART lots all in the suburbs are all paid. And I remember it being a complete pain as a commuter to have to get there early enough to get a spot and then still be paying like a fair amount of money. But on the other hand, it's like, well, if that's what needs to happen, that's what needs to happen.
I mean, there's a limited number of parking stalls. And so having a paid parking program is one of the only ways you're going to really be able to manage that demand. We're not going to add more parking stalls. Sound Trans is actually looking at having to defer a lot of the ones that it's planned because of the budget shortfall. And it makes sense that would be the first thing to cut, because otherwise we literally can't build the actual line. And so the demand, especially in places like Linwood for the end of the one line right now, is so outweighing the number of parking stalls that having a pricing program is really going to be the only way that it's going to work long term.
I'm also curious about like what the right balance is for what to charge, because I'm thinking about the debates here about prices for parking lately. So you all might remember last fall, rates in Columbia City jumped to $6.50 an hour. And many residents there were saying that it made it hard for them to just live and work in Columbia City. And about a month ago, the city lowered those rates by $2.50. So now the peak, I believe, is $4 an hour, which that sounds more reasonable to me. I feel like $6.50 an hour feels like downtown prices.
Yeah,
to
that's
me.
Pioneer Square. I literally paid $6.50 to park in Pioneer Square for an hour on Tuesday.
But yeah, it's like, what is the right balance there? I'm also curious, Ryan, if you have any insight into like what goes into determining these prices. What are agencies thinking about when they set these prices?
Yeah. And so Seattle's had a dynamic pricing program in effect for like 15 years now, in which they set the rate based on usage. And so the North Star it's quantified at about 80% availability. So it's hoped to be translating into around 1 or 2 stalls available on every block at any given time. And so not having to circle around the block to find parking. And so they do raise and lower that rate about twice a year based on that usage. And so obviously in places like Columbia City, where the amount of on-street paid parking is very tightly focused around that very, very dense business district. And so I know that SDOT was looking at it, kind of expanding that to actually allow more paid parking, which also got some pushback from the nearby residents. And so it's a balancing act, but obviously, Pioneer Square, it maybe is a bigger geographic area, and so there's more stalls. And so it does have to do with how many stalls you have versus your demand. And so if there's a lot more space, then you could end up with a lower rate, even though it seems like a higher demand area.
I feel like my general rule, I'm realizing that I've been using until now, but like anything north of the stadiums or south of the canal, I'm not even going to bother trying to drive. Like it is not, I'm not going to find parking, or like, if I find parking, it's going to take longer than it would take to just walk to transit and get on the transit and go. Like any time that I would have saved by driving is actually eaten up by trying to find a parking spot.
It's interesting to that point, like, because I had to drive to Pioneer Square because I then had to go to the U District, which I don't recommend trying to do on a Wednesday at 4:00. It took me forever, but it's because I had to pick up my kids, right? So it's like, it sort of depends on the long-term trajectory of what you're doing and like the choice you have to make. Because I would have loved to have taken the bus, right? Or something similar, but it's just tough when you have to get from one neighborhood to another and then to, go to a third location and pick up children or whatever you have to do that necessitates a car.
Sure. But to maybe build on that, like what would have happened if you got to Pioneer Square and there was no stalls available because everyone was camping out all day because the parking was 50 cents an hour?
Got me. No, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So it is really this like tough balance that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure if you're one of those people who got a spot early and you get to just camp out in it, you're like, this is great for me personally.
Right. I feel good about this. Right.
But yeah, if you're there after, 9:30 a.m., it's like you're out of luck. So, well, hopefully that works out well for Bellevue to try this new program. And I'm sure the city will be collecting stats on how that's working for them. Ryan Packer, thank you so much for joining us today.
It was great to be here.
And Liam Billingham, thanks as always for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
That's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. I am your host, Jane C. Hu. And listeners, we want to hear from you. If you've got thoughts on parking fees, if you've got thoughts on our sales tax going towards road fixes, send us an email at seattle@citycast.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see ya, Seattle. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen so you never miss an episode. Also, leave us a little review. It's really helpful. And tell your friends about us. You can also get more local news and events delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter. Just go to seattle.citycast.fm. And you can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok at CityCast Seattle, and you can watch full episodes of this show on YouTube.